spiritual elevation. Congregation Beit D.C.B invites you to the annual Unity Shabbat Kum on Saturday, May 24th, 2025. Where? At Shelf Lofts, Brooklyn, 120 Hamilton Avenue, Brooklyn, New York, 11231. This day is dedicated to praising and glorifying the Most High Yah, bringing together congregations, guests, and truth seekers in a celebration of unity, love, peace, and harmony. Join us for heartfelt prayers, inspiring teachings, and uplifting music that will resonate with your soul. Be part of this transformative experience that strengthens our community bonds and deepens our spiritual connections. For more information and to reserve your spot, call us at 347-622-9090 or email us at info@baitdcb.org. Let's come together in faith and fellowship at the Unity Shabbat Kum. You won't want to miss it. Shalom.
By the rivers of Babylon, yeah, we sat down and we cried when we remembered Jerusalem. We were sick, Lord, near to dying.
Shalom, shalom, family. Welcome once again to another Bible class, another Bible study. My name is Uzi Alewi, one of the teachers of Congregation Beit CHOKMAH BINAH, located in the Red Hook section of Brooklyn, New York, giving all honor, glory, and praise to the Most High, King of the universe, for life, food, clothing, and shelter, wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, thanking the Creator of heaven and earth for all things and everything, giving glory to the Most High God for allowing us to be all here in the land of the living. All of us woke up this morning, if you're hearing my voice, so we're thankful to the Creator for that. Praying that the Most High God will continue to bless us, keep us, restore us, that He will help us to be strengthened once again, that He will help us through our endeavors, those who are sick, the downtrodden, the poor, the needy, that the Most High God will bless each and every one of you with life, with strength, the ability to continue on and not to fall into a rut and get in a depressive state. Praying that the Creator will continue to help us to build, to grow, to move forward in all the things that we put forth in righteousness to do. Also praying that the Most High God will bless the works of our hands, that He will guide us through the rough patches, that He will help us and facilitate for us our lives so that we don't go through too many rough patches. So thanking all of you once again for joining us, and we give glory to the Most High God, King of the universe, forever and ever. Hallelujah. How's everyone doing out there? Praying that everyone is well, praying that everyone is in good spirits. So if you tuned into Beit D.C.B yesterday, you seen that we had a late start. We had some visitors from our sister camp down in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we had a wonderful time. If you got to see it on the screen, you felt the spirit of praise and coming together, unity. That's the way it's supposed to be. So sorry for the late start yesterday, but that was the block of time that we could get in order for us to get all the way to sundown. So I hope that everyone enjoyed it, that everyone had a great time, because I certainly did enjoy it, and I had a great time. So thank you all once again for being so patient. I know I tricked some of you in the morning. Y'all thought that we were having I just ran a service, a previous service with the same topic. So, but the real live service was in the afternoon. All right, so you got a double dose of services. Hallelujah. So without any further ado, we're going to move straight ahead, and I'm going to pass it on to my brother, Rabbi Chief Binyamin. Today, he will be taking your questions. Today is just a day to ask questions. That's it. So, Rabbi, take it away.
But giving praise and honor to the Most High and thanking Him for all of our lives and this opportunity that he has given us to call upon his name and worship before him. Thanking all of you for joining us this morning. And we invite you to like and subscribe to the channel, share it with your family and your friends. This Bible study we do every Sunday morning, 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. So as long as you utilize the Bible as the foundation of your belief, this Bible study is for you. So as mentioned, we do appreciate everybody for joining in. Today is all about your questions or your comments that you may have. We'll get back on track with our Isaiah discussion, God willing, next week, where we try to have a monthly question and answer. So, giving people time, you can ask your questions. Chief Uziel will be watching the chat, as well as the moderators as well, watching the chat for your questions. So any questions you have on any subject, we'll do the best that we can to answer them. And we pray that the Most High will bless us all with knowledge, wisdom, and understanding as we proceed with answering some of the questions, or attempting to answer all of the questions that people have on this day. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them at this time. It could be on any subject. So next week, as mentioned, we'll get back on track with our discussion on Isaiah. And over the next few weeks, we probably won't complete Isaiah 66 in succession, because somewhere along the line, we'll have a discussion on Shavuot, because Shavuot will be coming up in a few weeks. So we do have about 4 more chapters in Isaiah to do, to complete up until Isaiah chapter 66. But again, as mentioned, over the course of those next few weeks, Shavuot will be coming up. Not exactly within those 4 weeks. Yeah, Shavuot will be coming up. So during one of the weeks to come, we'll have a discussion on Shavuot. So that will probably be the only break in our discussion. Actually, probably a question and answer as the month will change within that time as well. So that's what we're looking forward to over the course of the next 4 weeks. More discussion on Isaiah, Shavuot, and another question and answer discussion as well. So again, if you have any questions, you can ask them in the chat, or this is the opportunity that if you know anybody out there that has or have had questions, that you can invite them in so that they can ask their questions, or you could ask the questions for them as well.
I have a question. So for years, and I've been going over this with you. So, but for years we've learned that drink offerings are poured on the side of the altar. Now I know of the blood of animals being poured out or dashed on the side of the altar. Some I think when we were dedicating the tabernacle, the Mishkan, we had to smear some blood on certain points of the altar. Also, I believe we sprinkled some blood. Am I correct, Rabbi?
Yeah, blood is poured on or dashed actually on the side or the walls of the outside walls of the altar. In some cases, the blood will be put upon the horns of the altar, and even the incense altar within the tabernacle, blood will be put on the horns of that altar.
So, getting back to the drink offerings, for years, we've been taught that the drink offerings are poured on the side of the altar also. Did you ever hear that before?
Yes, yeah.
But, all right, so can you explain to me Numbers chapter 15, verse 10?
So let me get that one. 15 verse.
Right. Is the rabbi there? Seems like he fell out.
No, I'm pulling up the chapter and the verse so it can be shared. Okay, so 15:10. And just for, as usual, we go back a little bit,
Right.
just to,
I guess you could go from the beginning of the chapter because I
you
think
know,
it's
far back we can go back, but yeah, we can start from the beginning then. So it starts off by saying, and Yahweh spoke unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When you are come into the land of your habitations, which I give unto you, and will make an offering by fire unto Yahweh, a burnt offering or a sacrifice in fulfillment of a vow clearly uttered, or of a freewill offering, or in your appointed seasons, to make a sweet savor unto Yahweh, of the herd or of the flock. Then shall he that brings his offering present unto Yahweh a meal offering of a tenth part of an ephah of fine flour, mingled with the fourth part of a hin of oil, and wine for the drink offering, the fourth part of a hin, shalt thou prepare with the burnt offering or for the sacrifice for each lamb. So, and before we continue, just what this chapter starts off explaining, and it's also explained in other places, but in particular, this chapter is detailing that when you have a burnt offering, that there's a meal offering and a drink offering that goes along with it. Now, depending on the category of the burnt offering category in terms of the animal that is being used for the burnt offering, then you would have a specific measurement for the meal offering and a specific measurement for the drink offering. So it starts off with, in particular, a lamb, because as it says in verse 3, the burnt offering could be of the herd or of the flock, meaning it could be of the cattle or of, as it mentions here, that's as we are about to get into, of lambs. You also have rams as well. And this chapter should be detailing that as well. So it starts off that when it's a lamb, that the meal offering, and these are measurements, these are ancient measurements, of course, that for the meal offering, you have the tenth part of an ephah of fine flour, and then that meal offering or that grain would be mixed or mingled, as it says in the translation, with a fourth part of a hin of oil. So that would be mixed together. And when you have the lamb, that it also for the lamb would also have a drink offering. And the drink offering for this lamb would also be a fourth part of a hin of wine. So just to give clarity, the chapter talking about a burnt offering. For the burnt offering of a lamb, you have the meal offering, which is the tenth part of an ephah of fine flour mixed with a fourth part of a hin of oil. And the wine the wine drink offering is going to be a fourth part of a hin of wine. And of course, the meal offering and the drink offering are not mixed together. They're two separate items. And that's for the lamb. Then for the ram, as it continues in verse 6, or for a ram, thou shalt prepare for a meal offering 2/10 parts of an ephah of fine flour, mingled with the third part of a hin of oil. And for the drink offering, thou shalt present the third part of a hin of wine of a sweet savor unto Jehovah. So for the ram, the meal offering measurements are different. You have 2/10 of a part of an ephah of fine flour with the third part of a hin of oil. And then for the drink offering, you have the third part of a hin of wine. So that's for the ram. And then for because it's going to talk about the bullock or cattle or of the herd as it gets to this part. And for verse 8, when thou prepares a bullock for a burnt offering or for a sacrifice of fulfillment of a vow clearly uttered, or for peace offerings unto Jehovah, then shall there be presented with the bullock a meal offering of 3/10 parts of an ephah of fine flour mingled with a half a hin of oil, and thou shalt present for the drink offering half a hin of wine for an offering made by fire of a sweet savor unto Jehovah. And that brings up to the to the verse that you were talking about. So the verse that you were talking about. Actually, so continue because I'll continue because it's probably further down that you're looking at, or looking for. Because verse 10 just says, and thou shalt present for the drink offering half a hin of wine for an offering made by fire of a sweet savor unto. So 10, you have the yayin, which is the wine, shall offer for a drink offering nesek, the drink offer, chatzi hahin, half a hin, ishef, which is fire or fire offering, reach nichoach, which is the sweet savor unto Yehovah. So this chapter is basically speaking about the different measurements of the meal offering and the drink offering based on the category of the burnt offering. And I think there's the verse you're looking for speaks about the location of the drink offering. Yeah. Yeah, no, it says that. Yeah, so no, I thought there was a specific thing because because verse 10 is the same as, well, yeah, all of them are saying, you have verse 7. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. So the drink offering for this one. Mhm.
My whole thing is we've been told that the drink offerings are poured out on the side of the altar.
Right.
I searched in the Tanakh to see when drink offerings were poured out, and
Right.
I never really see it speak of it specifically like it does the blood of sacrifices.
Mhm.
It always like the drink offering is always mingled with something. It's always poured upon the altar. You know what I mean? It seems like it's poured and it's burnt, just as it shows here. You know, and thou shalt present for the drink offering half a hin of wine for an offering made by fire.
About 5. So with the wine would, based on the description, would be poured on the fire itself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because that's, and as people are still
Mm-hmm.
getting their questions together, so it's quite possible based on this and other portions. I know there's another chapter and verse as well that
Oh,
could
that's
probably
I believe is Numbers 25 with during the offerings. What is it? 28.
would be 28. That would be
28.
28. Would probably be clear, but yeah, based on this, the wine or the drink offering is an offering made by fire, and this verse here just rounds up everything because it already talked about the lamb, talked about the ram, and I was talking about the bullock, and it mentions specifically, and then it says in verse 11, just to tie everything, it said, "Thus shall it be done for each bullock, or for each ram, or for each of the he lambs, or of the kids." And it doesn't mention any. Just want to see if it mentions drink offerings later on in this chapter, and it doesn't here. So as you're stating, and it would make sense based on the verse that the drink offering is an offering made by fire, as opposed to being poured out on the side of the altar or around the altar as well, or even just poured in the horns on the altar or something like that. It's actually poured on
Mm-hmm.
the burnt offering itself on the fire. And as and it would make sense also because the meal offering we know goes on the fire. It would make sense that, or a portion, well, yeah, the portion of the meal offering would go in the fire.
Right.
And so therefore the drink offering would also go on the fire as well.
I mean, I've Numbers 28. I mean, basically, I think Numbers 15 is clearer than Numbers 28, but I could be, I could be wrong, because number 28, it says, "And Yahweh spoke unto Moses, saying, Command children of Israel, and say unto them, My food which is presented unto me for offerings made by fire of a sweet savor unto me shall be observe to offer unto me in its due season. And thou shalt say unto them, this is the offering made by fire, which ye shall bring unto Yahweh. He lambs of the first year, without blemish, 2 day by day, for a continual burnt offering. The one lamb shalt thou offer in the morning, and the other lamb shalt thou offer at dusk. And the 10th part of an ephah of fine flour for a meal offering, mingled with the 4th part of a hin of beaten oil. It is a continual burnt offering which was offered in Mount Sinai for a sweet savor, an offering made by fire unto Jehovah. And the drink offering thereof shall be the 4th part of a hin for the one lamb. In the holy place shalt thou pour out a drink offering of strong drink unto Jehovah. And the other lamb shalt thou present at dusk as the meal offering of the morning, and as the drink offering thereof, thou shalt present it an offering made by fire of a sweet savor unto Jehovah. So I think this also says as a drink offering made by fire, the drink offering.
Yeah, that's 28 verse 8.
Yeah.
The offering made by fire.
I think verse 7 might be the confusion. In the holy place shalt thou pour out the drink offering of strong drink unto Jehovah. Or is that just strong drink? And in contrast to wine.
The tabernacle itself would be the holy place.
The holy place. Right.
The Holy of Holies. So even the courtyard would be considered the holy
place.
The holy place. And this chapter is also following from what we read in chapter 15. It's still talking about burnt offerings. But this chapter and the following chapter, chapter 29, is just giving the burnt offerings and the sin offerings for each day, for every Sabbath day, for the new moons, and for each of the holy days. So it's being specific only towards the days, but the measurements are going to be the same as it mentioned in Numbers chapter 15. And Numbers chapter 15 is basically giving an explanation of the measurements, while this chapter is telling us the amount of offerings, amount of burnt offerings, sin offerings, drink offerings, meal offerings that would take place on specific days. But it does mention that the same way that the drink offering is a fire offering or made by fire.
So could it be that specific understanding of pouring out all drink offering comes from verse 7 when that only speaks about strong? Is there a difference? Does it use a different word for strong drink and wine?
Wine is yayin, and the strong drink, the word here is, and sometimes they are interchangeable.
Got you.
Sometimes, I don't want to say they are exactly the same, but in some places you'll see it being interchangeable, as you see here, shekar, strong drink, intoxicating drink, fermented or intoxicating liquor, which wine is a category of. So like I said, sometimes you'll see it being used interchangeably in regards to the offerings.
Also, so then that leads me to my next question. So I know sometimes we have a back and forth on whether or not yain or wine is permissible on the feast of CHOKMAH, right? So with that understanding that we established that the yain is presented as a burnt offering, right? If we go to Leviticus chapter 2, verse 11, or verse 10, you could start from verse 10 and verse 11. And if we read this,
just real quick, it's the verse. I went back to Numbers 15 because this is what I was looking at as we were reading. So in verse 5, It says, and wine for the drink offering, the fourth part of a hin, shalt thou prepare with the burnt offering or for the sacrifice for each lamb. The word that they use here in the Hebrew is al, which sometimes could be translated as with, but it usually means, well, actually, not usually, it means on or upon. And some, for this, just to make sense of certain things, they'll translate it as with, as they do here. But in general, the word al, the Hebrew word al, means upon. So a more accurate translation for verse 5 could be, and wine for the drink offering, the fourth part of a hin, shalt thou prepare upon the burnt offering or for the sacrifice for each lamb. So this verse 5 will coincide with what you were pointing out in verse 10,
Right.
to where the drink offering is poured
On the
on
altar.
the burnt offering or on the fire, as opposed to outside of the
Gotcha. So,
the same way in verse 9, which says, then shall there be presented with the bullock a meal offering of 3/10 parts of an eighth of fine flour mingled with half a hin of oil. And then they use the word here again, al, in regards to the meal offering, which we know the meal offering is put upon the burnt offering. So just for consistency's sake, the word al is upon. So in reference to both the meal offering and drink offering, the word al upon, which means upon, is used. So the sense would be that both the meal offering and the drink offering are put on the burnt offering. Just
upon the
if there's
burnt
any other verse that uses the word al here, but those two verses in particular for the meal offering and drink offering use the word al, which means upon. So you were saying Leviticus.
So yeah, Leviticus chapter 2, verse 11. So I know sometimes we have the controversy of whether or not we could drink yayin on Pesach. It's a disagreement, you know, with whether or not we can or we cannot. Some, just to be fair, the people who argue against it say that because it's fermented, that is leavening, right? It's leavening, so you cannot we cannot have it during Pesach or during the time of CHOKMAH. But if you go to Leviticus chapter 2, verse 10 and 11, it says, you want to read it or you want me to read it?
So yeah, Leviticus 2, verse 10. He says, so actually
I mean, you can actually start
start
from
from
verse
9. Let me
11.
start from 9.
Okay.
Yeah, because this chapter is talking about meal offerings.
Right.
So and it's talking about the different categories of meal offerings,
Right.
whether it's just the dry grain, whether it's yeah, we'll just briefly start from verse 2 just to explain the
Good
chapter.
context. Okay.
So verse 1 starts off saying, and when anyone brings a meal offering unto Jehovah, his offering shall be of fine flour, and he shall pour oil upon it and put frankincense thereon. And he shall bring it to Aaron's sons, the priests, and he shall take thereout his handful of the fine flour thereof, and of the oil thereof, together with all the frankincense thereof, and the priest shall make the memorial part thereof smoke upon the altar, an offering made by fire of a sweet savor unto Jehovah. But that which is left of the meal offering shall be Aaron's and his sons. It is a thing most holy of the offerings of Jehovah made by fire. So it's talking about the meal offerings when they're presented. So this still is in conjunction with what we read in Numbers chapter 15 and 28, because although people may bring a meal offering by itself, usually a meal offering goes along with a burnt offering, as we read in the prior chapters. And so the meal offering is going to belong to Aaron and his sons. That's basically the grain that they, because many of them, because of their location, they dwell in cities. They may not, the Levitical cities which have fields around them, where the Levites Consequently, the priests, as well, that dwell within those cities will be able to grow grain, raise crop, be able to sustain themselves. But the priests themselves, they exist directly off of what the people give via the tithes, which will go to the Levites, and the Levites in turn give 10% of that to the priests, and the first fruits and the firstborn of animals, which go directly to the priests. So that's how the priests will survive, along with wherever they live and what is produced around them. So the meal offerings go directly to Aaron and his sons, who are the priests. So then the chapter is going to talk about the different categories of meal offerings. So verse 4 talks about the meal offering baked in the oven. And the meal offerings, by the way, are unleavened. So I'll just read verse 4. And when I bring us a meal offering baked in the oven, it shall be unleavened cakes of fine flour mingled with oil, or unleavened wafers spread with oil. So that's the meal offering baked in the oven. Then verse 5, you have the meal offering baked in a griddle. Still has to be unleavened, but still mingled with oil. So the griddle would be like basically, as people, as you know today, a griddle, say in the sense of making a pancake, so, for lack of a better comparison. So we have the meal offering on the griddle would be comparable to a pancake. The meal offering baked in the oven, of course, would be just the unleavened bread. You roll it out, put it in the oven to bake. So the griddle is still unleavened. They still mingle with oil. When you have in verse 7, and if that meal offering be a meal offering of the stewing pan, what people will refer to that today is dumpling, where you have, you make your meal from the grain, roll it up, put it in a stewing pan, or you boil it. So that's comparable to dumpling, as we know it today. And it's also mingled with oil, and it's unleavened. And then you have the dry grain, which doesn't mention specifically here as we're reading it, but it's within this chapter. Somebody could just present a meal offering and just present the grain. Then it talks about in verse 9, and the priest shall take off from the meal offering the memorial part thereof, and shall make a smoke upon the altar, an offering made by fire of a sweet savor unto Yahweh. But that which is left of the meal offering shall be Aaron's and his sons. It is the thing most holy of the offerings of Yahweh made by fire. So when the meal offerings are presented with the animals that are presented on the altar, the priests take a portion of that, a handful of that, whatever the category of meal offering, they put that upon the fire, and then cause it to smoke upon the altar, as we read in the other chapters that we read, where it said the meal offering goes on the altar, on the burnt offering itself, and Aaron and his sons keep the rest of it for themselves, and it's holy, so they have to eat it in a holy place. Then verse 11, it says, no meal offering which you shall bring unto Yahweh shall be made with leaven, for ye shall make no leaven, nor any honey smoked as an offering made by fire unto Yahweh. So that's the verse that you pointed to here. So as you know, and it mentioned it specifically as we read early in the chapter. Meal offerings are all unleavened. Whether you bake it, whether you stew it, whether you put on the griddle, it can't be made with leaven. So verse 11 is just a summary of what we read prior, and it says, no meal offering which you shall bring unto Yahweh shall be made with leaven, for you shall make no leaven, nor any honey smoke as an offering made by fire unto Yahweh. So no leavening can go upon the altar of Yahweh at all.
So I asked someone about it. They said, "Oh no, you're not supposed to put anything sweet or anything sour on the altar." But I said, "Well, it doesn't say that. It just says don't put any honey or anything leavened, meaning anything of the grain that's leavened, right?"
Mm-hmm. Right.
So then goes back to my original question: if wine is used as the burnt offering, and we proved that you went through the Hebrew al means with or upon, right? Then wouldn't the Most High God look at wine and say, if it was, as you know, some people say that is leavening, when he said, don't put that on my altar? I mean, if that's what he considered as being leavening.
Right, so based on what we read, especially when we have these discussions about the Feast of Unleavened Bread, wine wouldn't be considered leavening or could be considered leaven. And the point that you're making in here and the comparison is that, which is also a good one, the comparison that you're making is the drink offering would be poured on the altar itself, upon the burnt offering and the meal offering, just based on the top of the altar itself.
Right.
And verse 11 of Leviticus chapter 2 states that there can't be any leaven made to smoke
Right.
upon the altar. So therefore, wine wouldn't be considered leaven because since God already said no leaven could go upon the altar, then if wine was considered leaven, then wine wouldn't be able to be poured upon the altar. But there were other things that we read within Numbers chapter 15 and 28, which show that most likely the wine was poured upon the altar and not on the side of the altar.
Right. Okay. I just want clarity on that, because sometimes you look for things, you try to understand them, you just kind of repeat what you've been told, you pour it out on the ground, but it never really, I don't see that when I'm reading it. It says that you use it as a burnt offering. And then someone told me also, anything that's made of fruit, you can't burn on the altar. So then I told him, I said, well, olive oil it comes from a fruit. That, you know, olives are a fruit, although we don't think of them as a fruit. But olives are fruits, you know. They produce oil, but they are a fruit, you know. So we can move on to other questions. I just needed that, because we be having these discussions, and I just wanted to see your take on it. Let me see here. All right, Shalom, Chief Uzi. This is from CEO Cold. Shalom, Chief Uzi Alewi and Chief Rabbi Binyamin. When a woman is unclean and her blood gets onto the sheets, clothing, and it is stained, should it be thrown away, or can it be used if there is no mold?
So that's a good question. And I know it's been asked years prior, because as we know, and just for clarity, we'll actually go to the law first before we continue. So Leviticus chapter 15 talks about the issues that come out of male and female that makes the individual unclean, and also things that they come in contact with or the issue comes in contact unclean. So chapter 15 talks about what we would know today, or the beginning of it talks from the perspective of the male and the issue that comes from the male, which we know today as gonorrhea or chlamydia or any STI that causes a man to have an issue, to have an issue.
You mean STD?
Overall. STD. Today they say STI. They call it STI. There's a lot of what's the term?
Politically correct.
Right, terms, yeah. So it's STIs, sexually transmitted infection, as opposed to a disease, because before things could grow into a disease, you still get infected first. So they call them STIs today. Of course, 70s and prior, they used to call those venereal diseases. They don't call that anymore, because again, to be politically correct, if you term something a venereal disease, it's as though it's the fault of the woman when you call it a venereal disease. So that's why it became STDs later on, and then now they call it STIs. So that's just a brief history of the terminology,
We're
because
gonna have
people
to
of
go into that a
older
little
age
bit.
may be familiar with the term VD or venereal disease. Then, as for our generation, we know them as STDs, and the generation that comes after us, they know them as STI.
STI.
That was just a progression of that. Then, in the middle of the chapter, starting from it's going to talk about the flow of seed coming out of a man. So that's going to be verse 16. So this is just a seminal discharge, whether a man is laying with, his wife, or man has a nocturnal emission. That's 16, 17, and 18. So verse 19 is where the question is stemming from. And if a woman have an issue, and her issue in her flesh be blood, she shall be in her impurity 7 days, and whosoever toucheth her shall be unclean until the even. So this is talking about menstrual blood, starting from verse 19. And verse 20 says, and everything that she lies upon in her impurity shall be unclean. Everything also that she sits upon shall be unclean. And whosoever touches her bed shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until the even. And whosoever touches anything that she sits upon shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until the even. And if he be on the bed or on anything wherein she sits, when he touches it, he shall be unclean until the even. So verse 23 is specifically talking about the question. So now if the blood gets upon the bed or the sheets or anything, just as when she's unclean throughout those 7 days, whatever she sits upon is unclean. Whoever sits after her is unclean, has to bathe himself in water, wash his clothes, and be unclean until the even. Same thing with basically everything that she sits upon. Anybody that comes after, they're unclean until the evening, but of course they have to bathe themselves in water, wash their clothes. Now the blood specifically, same thing. If actually, let's get to this to continue. And if any man lie with her and her, this verse 24 would help with the question as well. And if any man lie with her and her impurity be upon him, he shall be unclean 7 days, and every bed whereon he lies shall be unclean. So if an individual actually touches the blood, verse 24 is saying basically that man and a woman should not have intercourse while she's menstruating, because the blood that is coming out of her comes upon him, he's unclean for 7 days. And again, he's unclean for 7 days as opposed to just 1 day for sitting behind her or laying behind her, because the blood actually gets on him. So it's the blood coming in direct contact with the menstrual blood that causes an individual to be unclean for 7 days. So now if blood gets upon a sheet and the sheet is not able to be thoroughly cleansed out of it, then as long as that blood is still there, whoever touches the blood specifically, blood could be upon the sheet, and you touch the sheet, you're unclean. You have to bathe yourself in which, just to give some clarity here. So I just start over. So if blood gets on a sheet in particular or upon a bed, somebody touches the bed but not the blood specifically, they are unclean because they touched an item that the blood came upon. They have to bathe themselves in water, wash their clothes, and be unclean until the even. If they actually touch the blood specifically, they're unclean for 7 days. And that they get an uncleanness that can be passed. So they have to be separated. Whatever bed, as it says here in verse 24, any bed that they lay upon shall be unclean. Whoever they touch will be unclean. The same way that as the woman that has the flow, other people that contact her or contact anything that she sits or lays upon become unclean. So getting back to the question, as long as the blood is still on the sheet, sometimes, it depends on, and that's just any type of blood, that is, any type of blood is going to be difficult to clean. That's why, of course, when it comes to forensic, people, still could find blood, even though people tried their best. Usually it takes bleach to get rid of blood. So again, if the blood is still staining the sheet, then anybody that touches the sheet will still be unclean. And if anybody touches that blood stain, they will be unclean for 7 days. So hopefully that answers the question. So it's not just a matter of putting the sheets in the wash and taking out and the sheet become clean. The blood itself, the blood stain itself has to be removed from the sheets or any article of clothing or anything that the blood gets upon.
So you're saying even after the sheets are washed thoroughly, with bleach and everything, and you still have a stain there, that sheet
No,
is
not a stain because of bleach, but if you still have a blood stain, because regular detergent is not gonna be good enough to get blood out. You need something like bleach to get the blood stain out. So if you just do a regular wash with regular detergent and the sheet comes out and you still see a blood stain there, that's still the blood. Just making reference to forensics, like say somebody
right. I know what you're saying.
shoots, kills somebody, the blood gets on sheets, carpets, or whatever. People try to scrub out the blood, but people still find the blood there because they use other detections and they still find the blood because they still find the blood. They can still find the DNA of the blood and all that stuff. That means the blood is still there. So if they don't use a proper method of removing the blood stain, then the blood is still there. So that would cause, but if you bleach the blood stain, of course, you're going to have a stain in that area of the sheet, but that's not going to be from the blood. It's going to be from the bleach, cleansing that area, making that area look different than everything else around it. So that would actually be a bleach stain as opposed to a blood stain. So in order to remove the blood, better methods have to be used to remove the blood. And that's, of course, depends on the heaviness of the flow of the blood, because if there's not a heavy flow of blood, of course, some regular washing can get the blood stains out, accurately. When we talk about forensic, we're talking about where people are profusely bleeding.
Right.
And, you need more than just a regular detergent and soap and stuff to get those blood stains out. But when it comes to menstrual blood, it's not, for most, I would say, well, for me to say some or most, that's actually would be incorrect either way because people have different flows. But based on the amount of blood, it could still be removed from just a general laundering of the clothes and the sheets and stuff like that.
It says that hot water can make the blood stain more difficult to remove by setting the protein in the fabric. So if you're washing blood stain clothing, you should use cold water. I would think hot water, but it says no, the hot water makes blood stain more difficult to remove. So so I guess we just got to do a thorough job of cleaning our sheets, scrubbing wherever that spot got on, scrubbing, on your clothing, wherever treat it, do what you got to do, and just try to get the
check it.
blood out.
Just today, women have more advanced protection than ancient times. So there's pads that.
But mistakes happen. Sometimes it comes down earlier than they expected, and they walking around and they could feel it. It falls in the underwear. What unexpected. And then it seeps through. Depending on the woman's flow, that might seep through her clothing. It's that sort of stuff. But women are not going to use something that would if they have a skirt on and it went through the skirt and they can't get that stain out, that they're going to retire that skirt.
Right.
No woman is going to ever put that back on again. So
when it comes to making the difference between clean and unclean, even though we're not in the land today, we're not at the temple site, we still have to make a difference between the clean and unclean in all the lands that we dwell in. But when it comes to questions about clean and unclean, we could always ask ourselves that if we were living in a time where the temple was standing, would we ourselves or would we bring any of these things to a holy site? And that would help us to answer some of these questions. Because again, that's one of the major reasons why we have to make a difference between the clean and the unclean. But we still have to make that difference, every day of the week, wherever we are. So we still have to be careful. But, in regards to like the question that was asked or any questions related to that, would you take the chance of wearing clothes that were previously blood stained and you still see the stain on it and go to the temple site? So that's, that helps us to answer some of these questions.
Yeah, but that's not the difficult one. The difficult one is sheets. If again on sheets, you wash it 3, 4, 5 times, and you still have the protein, or what seems like because that's what really, I guess, gives it the color. And you might still see like a little stain there. It might not necessarily look red, but you could see actually that something's been there. So that's the most difficult part, because then a woman is talking about you throwing away your sheets. It might have seeped through to the bed. So that's a whole nother topic. I guess with beds you could put plastic on it to prevent it from or bed what do you call it?
Bed liners.
Yeah, bed liners and stuff like that, which will protect it. But yeah, I guess if you are a person that when you menstruate kind of heavy and you have those type of accidents often, that you should use precaution in your bedding and things of this nature when you actually go to bed or things of this nature, just to be prepared that this thing doesn't be difficult for you to do. I mean, that's all the advice I could give when it comes to that. All right, we got some questions here. Abraham Yisrael Shalom, do you believe that when Yah created light and he divided the light from darkness, that the time before the division was morning or evening?
So before that division, it doesn't, in terms of daylight or nighttime, we just mentioned the general darkness before the light was created. God called the light day. Then the darkness, of course, he called night. But if you're talking about the question before that, there was neither day nor night. Mm-hmm. Before the light was created, it was just a darkness, and that darkness wasn't called night until light was created. So, and that darkness preceded light for we don't know for how long, because of course God has no beginning, and when we know he created darkness, as we read in the book of Isaiah, that darkness again wasn't called night until light was created. So it was just something that was just there.
Joseph Ben, what's the purpose of sacrifice if the Most High doesn't need anything?
So we're not given anything specific in terms of a reason why the sacrifices were detailed. Early on we were talking about Numbers chapter 15, Leviticus, Numbers 28 and 29, where God gives the requirements or the specifications of offerings, but we don't read where God says specifically why. And as the question is stating, God does not need anything. So what we can, and this is just an opinion, what we could surmise is that sacrifices are actually for the individual presenting the sacrifice of the offering, showing God that they're willing to give up something of themselves to either get a blessing or to make atonement for sin, because there's different categories of sacrifices. There's burnt offerings, there's meal offerings, drink offerings, which we mentioned already. The sin offerings, there's a category under that of guilt offering. You have offerings that are voluntary. You have offerings for a vow. So you have peace offerings. You have Thanksgiving offerings, which are a category of peace offerings. So you have different categories of offerings. So these are just things from the perspective of the individual presenting it to show God that and that's why in English you have the word sacrifice, to show God that you're willing to give up something of yourself in order to gain the attention or favor of God. So these sacrifices or these offerings are not for the benefit of God, but for the benefit of the individual presenting it.
Abraham Yisrael, this question is in reference to Genesis 1:5 and the interpretation thereof in the cycle of days of the week. You answered that already. Let me see. Things they don't discuss in church. Why Deuteronomy 6:4 uses the word echad, compound unity one, rather than yachid, numerical one? You want me to ask you again?
Yeah, and I was gonna go to the chapter and verse at the same time, but you can read it again.
Why does Deuteronomy 6:4 use the word echad, count, quote, not quote, open parentheses, close parentheses, compound unity one, rather than yachid, open parentheses, close parentheses, numerical one?
So Deuteronomy 6:4. I'd have to see a place where the yachid is pronounced as opposed to echad. No, well, you have the word yachad, which actually means unity or togetherness. But echad is one. Actually, for this, we'll use the Blue Letter Bible for this one. So this is the word echad, which is, as we know, it's one. And we know in Deuteronomy chapter 6:4, there's various places where the word one is used, or echad is used. But it's numerical. It's still numerical, because even if in Genesis chapter 1, verse 5, which also can coincide with the previous question as well, so we could actually cover both at the same time. So Genesis chapter 1, verse 5, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. But in terms of echad is not what we would know as cardinal numbers, so to speak. So first day is actually a bad translation as opposed to saying one day, because echad is one. So where it says echad in Genesis chapter 1, verse 5, is just saying the evening and the morning were one day as opposed to the first day. It's not a completely bad translation, because we would understand that Genesis chapter 1 is talking about counting days, the 6 days of creation, and then you have the seventh day with the Sabbath day. So saying first day is not just a complete mistranslation, but a better translation would be to say one day or day one. Genesis chapter 1, verse 9, and God said, let the waters in the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear, and it was so. So the word echad, and is as here, and in various other places, is talking about one. It's talking about the unity of God, as opposed to the concept of a divisible God, or God or gods, representing various things. So the word echad, is actually a good word to use. Yachad, which some people know is actually unity, but the word yachad is sometimes used where you're bringing various elements and various components and various people together to form one. And that wouldn't be able to describe God because God is one, he's not divisible. So God wouldn't be united because there's no you can't divide God. So Yakad again means you have different components coming together as one, as opposed to Echad, which is just one. Something is standing in the singular. So hopefully that actually answers the question.
Let me see here. Joseph Ben, Shalom. Genesis 9:3 permits any and all things to be eaten.
No, because Leviticus chapter 11, even if let's say before Leviticus chapter 11, people were permitted to eat anything. Once we get to Leviticus chapter 11 and Deuteronomy chapter 14, God already changed that. It's the same way that, Abraham married a sister, that was changed afterwards. So Genesis chapter 9, could give the sense that everything was permissible to eat at that time. But we also know that Noah knew the difference between clean animals and unclean animals. So there were, and I'll just give my opinion on this again, that based on the fact that Noah knew the difference between clean animals and unclean animals, Noah was not eating or was not permitted to eat unclean animals. Of course, we know people, human beings afterwards were eating unclean animals anyway, but being that Noah knew the difference between the clean and the unclean, and God already specified that, and that notion was already known, that concept of making that separation of what animals to eat and what not to eat was already there.
Things they don't discuss in church. Are the laws of menstruation, uncleanness, and places of sitting no longer relevant today because of the invention of tampons today?
No, the laws of clean and unclean in all aspects are still relevant. Same way as we read in Leviticus chapter 15, not just with a woman during menstruation, but a man that has gonorrhea, a man that has a seminal discharge, people when they eat unclean animals and they become unclean, touching the dead. All of these laws are still relevant. In all aspects of the separation between clean and unclean, we don't have methods of becoming clean, such as coming in contact with the dead, but the law itself is still relevant in terms of knowing that there was a separation that should be made. When it comes to, again, everything else that was just mentioned, they're still going to be relevant. So it's not about blood. It's not about stigmatizing women who have, when they go through menstruation, but the laws of clean and unclean are relevant to all time. So it's not just one particular category, but it's all categories are relevant. And whether it's a pad or a tampon does not stop the flow of the woman. It was when the woman has the flow, she is unclean. So it's not, as the question prior or the discussion we had prior, is not just focusing on what the blood goes on, but anybody that has a flow, whether male or female, once they have that flow, whether the flow is stopped or not, once they have that flow, they are unclean. And based on the type of flow, whatever they sit upon or whoever they touch is also unclean afterwards.
Mm-hmm. And just to add to that, every woman doesn't flow for 7 days. Some women flow 4 or 5 days, but she's still separated for 7 days and she's still unclean for 7 days. And you still can't have sexual contact with her until that time is completed and is over, right? So it's not just on the floor of the blood or where the blood is left or is fell on, but is the period of time of separation that she has that makes her unclean, and that will make a man unclean.
Same thing as childbirth. She's separate for 40 days for when she has a male child, 80 days when she has a female child, and it's not based on the actual days of flow, but it's based on the period of time that God said that the individual should be separate. Same thing with the man that may have gonorrhea, that actually, in that case, he has to wait for it to stop, and then he's still unclean for 7 days after that to become clean. So it's not just the amount of days of the flow itself, but it's based on the amount of days that God said the individual is unclean for.
Says here. Question, Exodus 32. Why was Aaron not punished for making the golden calf? Also, why was he not punished in Numbers 12 when he and Miriam spoke against Moses' wife? Thanks.
So the reason why Aaron was not punished for the golden calf is because Moses petitioned for him. That is in Deuteronomy chapter 9. Because it mentions here, because chapter 9, Moses is talking to the generation that's going to cross the Jordan River. This is the 40th year after coming out of Egypt. So this generation is the one that's going to go and cross over the Jordan. So verse 8, it says, also in Horeb, you made Yehovah wroth, and Yehovah was angered with you to have destroyed you. Then Moses talks about he went up to the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights, and he received the tablets of stone, written with the finger of God with the 10 commandments on it. It mentioned that he came down. As we read in the book of Exodus, all of this stuff is in conjunction with what we read in the book of Exodus. He saw the people before the golden calf, threw the tablets down, broke it, and the people were punished. So now in verse 20, it says, moreover, Yehovah was very angry with Aaron to have destroyed him, and I prayed for Aaron also the same time. So the reason why Aaron was not punished is was not killed or destroyed, as it said in verse 20 here, is because Moses prayed for him the same way that Moses prayed for the people. So that's the only reason why. And that's specified here. Now, in terms of the book of Numbers chapter 12, it doesn't give a specific reason why Moses didn't receive leprosy, because we know that Miriam received leprosy for talking against Moses. We know that that specifically was her punishment. We don't read a specific punishment for Aaron, but anything beyond that would just be speculation. So for the golden calf, we have a specific reason or a specific answer for that. When it comes to Aaron and Miriam speaking against Moses, we don't have a specific answer for that one.
At that point, wasn't Aaron already told that he wasn't going into the land?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Not in Numbers 12. Yeah, they were still journeying away from Mount Sinai.
Okay.
So yeah, that wasn't until like somewhere around Numbers 20 with where Moses was angry and said what he said.
I think a question that could be asked is, why wasn't Miriam allowed to go into the land?
But it's not that, well, I wouldn't say, give my opinion, not that she was not allowed to go into the land. She died in the wilderness. I would just put it, in that perspective. So I wouldn't, I don't think there was anything against Miriam herself to go into the land, but we don't know exactly what her age was when the children of Israel left Egypt. We know that she was older than Moses. And they spent 40 years, or the children of Israel spent 40 years in the desert. So I don't think, that's an indictment on Miriam herself. I think, based on age, she passed away in the desert and was not able, and that's the reason why she didn't end up going into the land.
Did Caleb and Joshua's wives go into the land on their strength, or did they die with the others?
That would be an opinion based. That would be opinion based, and you you're speaking specifically about the wives that they would have had
Mm-hmm.
prior to the
Right.
declaration that was made. That would be speculation to really answer that.
All right. Let's see here. Man, it's a lot of questions, man. Shalom, family. What is the difference between the Gideon Bible and the King James Bible?
Just and to keep those one short, just different translators, different periods of time. The translations themselves would still be similar, but King James wanted to have his own version, which was done centuries before the Gideon Bible. But the Gideon Bible is just different translations, so that would be the answer for that.
Let me see. Pen comment. To the blood, cold water, and or hydrogen peroxide. Qadima by Yisrael writes hydrogen peroxide first to remove the blood. All right, so those are solutions. Coty F. Maureen Allen. To remove blood stains, one can use hydrogen peroxide on the stain for a few minutes. Allow the cold water and repeat it if necessary. Okay, so we have solutions to the problem. Darben Jesse. Could we consider stains as blood? Oh, we spoke about that already. Or unclean. Let me see. All praise to the Most High. Shalom, Chief Uziel, Rabbi Binyamin. This is from from Naomi by Yisrael. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 16, God commanded Adam not to eat from the tree of good and evil, and the day he does, he will die. Please clarify why they didn't die.
So Adam and Eve died. Of course, the command was given specifically to Adam, so Adam died. People refer to the direct statement where it says, on the day that you eat it, you will die. But you could also look at it in reference to, and I'd have to actually pull these other references in the Bible, where an individual is called a dead man once they commit a certain sin. The enactment of the death may not take place on the same day, but the pronouncement of death coming upon Adam was made the day that they ate of the fruit. So death entered into the anatomy of human beings once they ate that. So they didn't die specifically on that day. Again, as people are reading that verse specifically and looking at it as that, as opposed to looking at it as death entered the human anatomy on the day that they ate that fruit.
Let me see here. Yosef Ben, when you brush your teeth and your gums bleed, are you in sin when you swallow the blood?
No. So the eating of the command not to eat blood is eating of the blood of animals as well as human beings, but actually ingesting blood coming from elsewhere, and that's just to be specific. That doesn't mean that if you bleed. So let's give a scenario, and this will be posed as a question. So to answer that question, the answer is no, it's not sin. But let's pose this question. Somebody gets a snake bite. And actually, this is going to be a bad question anyway. But someone gets a snake bite, and whether the individual that's bitten or somebody else, because normally in ancient, not just ancient times, but even more modern times, people would suck the blood from that area and spit out the blood, of course, so the venom doesn't travel. But there's going to be a chance that trace of blood, of course, trace of venom, but not enough to kill an individual, but there's a trace of blood is going to be in the mouth of the individual anyway. So as we relate to this question, would that be considered sin? You know, of course, I would say no, but that's just a question to add on to the previous question. So it's not about just having a trace amount of blood. It's the actual what people used to do: kill animals, drain the blood, or don't cook the flesh of the animal properly, and the blood is still in the flesh, and they eat the flesh with the blood. That's specifically what God is commanding against. But you know, if you get a cut in your mouth, you might have bit your tongue. As mentioned, you know, brush your teeth and scraped your gums or whatever. You're not gonna be in sin or at fault for swallowing that blood.
Right here. All right, things they don't discuss in church. Follow up. Genesis 2, verse 24 describes marital unity, oneness, the same word as God described it himself in Deuteronomy 6:4.
Right, so you have the one flesh, and it doesn't mean that, going back to the previous question, it doesn't mean that echad can never mean multiple people or multiple components being one. The explanation was that when you have the word yakad, that is multiple components being represented as one. So that's just the difference between the terms. But when it talks about the man and the woman becoming one flesh, they are one because, of course, especially with that terminology, the woman was made from the man anyway. So the man was one complete human being, and there was a component taken from him to build a woman. So it's not inaccurate to say or to use the word echad in that reference because the component was one in the beginning anyway, and they're just rejoining. So it's not inaccurate or improper to use that word echad, you know, in that verse.
Sister Ivy question, the word states, a woman shall be separated during her uncleanness. Does this include cooking? LOL.
So these things are not done today, but however, in ancient times, or not just in ancient times, you know, when people that keep these laws and they have the means to do so, you would see where individuals that are supposed to be separated during these times are actually separated. So the questions in regards to cooking and other things usually don't come up because individuals are separated anyway. If we go to Numbers chapter 5, it would explain it a little bit better. So Numbers chapter 5, and this is as the children of Israel were in the desert. They did not journey from Mount Sinai yet, but they were receiving the laws of the clean and the unclean. And throughout the book of Leviticus, the laws of building the tabernacle in Exodus, the priests were put in their positions. So everything is in order. So now God is telling Moses here in chapter 5, and Jehovah spoke unto Moses, saying, command the children of Israel that they put out of the camp every leper and every one that has an issue, and whosoever is unclean by the dead. Both male and female shall you put out. Without the camp shall you put them, that they defile not their camp in the midst whereof I dwell. So there would be regions outside of the camp. We know that and of course, in the beginning of the book of Numbers, it talks about the divisions of the tribes. So everything is laid out at this point. So God is saying here that those that are lepers, they're removed from the camp. Everyone that has an issue, the word here is zav, when it talks about a person that has an issue. And this is the same word that's used in Leviticus chapter 15 for both the male and the female when they have a flow. So anybody that has any type of flow, it's just what happens is this English language that they're using here just sounds very harsh. So using the word put out means that it seems like they're all being stigmatized, or that there's some sin in them that they're being removed. But the real reason is because they can defile the camp. So anybody that has an issue that can contaminate somebody else or cause somebody else to become unclean, they would be removed from the camp. And it says in verse 3, whether they are male or female, they will be removed from the camp so that the camp is not defiled. It's not specifically about the tent of meeting, but the entire camp that God is dwelling amongst all of the tribes of Israel. So when looking at it from this aspect and looking at it in terms of anybody, that, of course, when we were in the land, people weren't removed from the land. But there would be areas where people would be separate. If people were living in a city, of course, you can have them removed from the city. If people were even within the city and you had a separate house, or people in the fields or villages and you had a separate tent, it's the same way on, just to give the example, where when Laban was looking through Jacob's camp, looking for his idols, and his daughter, he went into his daughter's tent, and she said, I can't stand up because the man or woman is upon me. That just shows that there was a separation, a strict separation physically between the clean and the unclean. So all of the questions in terms of the cooking and everything else normally wouldn't come into play, because once people are separate based on what we read, then that wouldn't become in question. But when you go back to Leviticus chapter 15, the same way it talks about the man that has an issue, anything he touches is unclean, the same way with the woman that has the menstruation, anything she touches is unclean as well. So these help to answer some of these questions. But again, the modern world that we're living in, we don't practice everything. And of course, living in small homes, living in apartments, and just making do the best way that we can, we don't get the full aspect or full thought pattern behind the actual separation. It's the same way, again, it's not to stigmatize anybody, but it's even a term nida, which just means separate, but people have been, and even still today, just use the word to talk about women when they're unclean, when the word nida actually means separation. So when an individual, male or female, is nida, that means that they are physically separated, and not because of sin or anything wrong. It's just a physical separation, and that's what the word means.
Okay. Zaymat, question. Are Israelites in the evolving Rabbi Matthews, B'nai Zakin communities in general more Karaite leaning or more rabbinic leaning in regard to accepting or discarding writings of the sages?
Question that, I started to answer the question in my mind before you finished, but in general, the practices that we do today, regardless of, I would say Israelites in general in, say, the United States, or I would say North America, leans towards rabbinical Judaism, or even before that, what the Pharisees were doing. Of course, we wouldn't profess to say that we keep all traditions or oral law or the Mishnah or anything like that. But in terms of making a comparison between the Sadducees and the Pharisees, who were the sects or certain sects of Israelites in prior generations, the way we practice today would lean towards the Pharisees' method of keeping Torah. There were just certain things, we would have to go through everything step by step. Of course, wouldn't be able to do that exactly right now. But yeah, a lot of the things that we do, and it's just innate within us. And, we got the influence from a lot of things living around European Jews. And that's how Israelites learned Torah, whether people, accept it or not. But that's how Israelites learned Torah, as Israelites were coming into this way of life in North America. if you're living in a different part of the world, whatever world that you're living, or part of, country or territory you're living in, and you're coming into this way of life, you're going to get influenced by those around you. So, being around a society of European Jews who strictly are rabbinic and strictly are following the ways of the Pharisees, as we start to come into this way of life, we pick up a lot of that. It's the same way as when we have the discussion on the bitter herb during the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and horseradish became the bitter herb of choice in North America because that's what European Jews were doing predominantly in North America as they brought that tradition over from Europe. So that's just to give a small example, but in general for the question, our practices lean more toward the Pharisees or lean more to rabbinics, even though we don't proclaim rabbinics or the Pharisee traditions.
Actual Israel. Shalom family. What tribe was David's mother from?
That's not mentioned in the scripture anywhere.
Things they don't discuss in church. Jehovah's Witnesses don't allow blood transfusions due to the biblical prohibition on ingesting blood. Is their theology misguided?
Yeah, it's misguided in the sense of where we talk about eating blood, taking the blood from the animal, drinking it, or eating the blood of the animal within the flesh of it, or not properly or accurately removing the blood of the flesh of an animal. A blood transfusion is, drawing blood from somebody and, using the IV to bring that blood into somebody that needs that type blood within them. So it's not in comparison to what God is permitting us from doing.
All right, we winding down here. Question, Zaymat. Being that we are in the lands of our captivity and many things are saturated in idolatry or sin, would it be ill-advised to meticulously search for and remove items, cars, etc. from our homes? I don't understand that question.
Can you read it again?
Being that we are in the lands of our captivity and many things are saturated in idolatry or sin, would it be ill-advised, I think maybe, would it be advised to meticulously search for and remove items, cars, etc. from our homes? I think you use ill-advised.
Okay, as opposed to advised.
I think advised, right. Yeah.
It would be advisable to do so. The issue is, and I don't want to say virtually impossible because it's not impossible to do anything as as we're trying to serve God. But as the question mentions, we're immersed in cultures that, and it's been like that for centuries, immersed in or dwelling around cultures that have gods for various things, and you have the names of gods on various things, and certain practices come from idolatry. So the meticulous search, yes, we should be doing that. In terms of eliminating and removing things, that would be on a case-by-case basis, and we could only do the best that we can, with each thing. But that's where having a community helps, because where one individual will be able to do research in one areas, then you have other individuals that can do research in other areas, and then we can all come together with the information. It's the same way that not everybody is going to be, for lack of a better term, top notch when it comes to dietary law, but then you have those that do a lot of research on it, and then they bring that information to the community in hopes of the community accepting the information. So it's just a matter of all of us coming together with our various skills. It's the same way where questions such as, just to bring these questions up, the Shield of David, comes into play, birthdays, different people have different
Traditions.
focuses of attention
Right.
when it comes to Torah. And that's the reason why, or one of the reasons why we did have judges in prior times that would filter all of this information, and where God set up prophets, and you had officers that would come to conclusions in all of these matters. So it's just about matter of the community coming together. But so the meticulous search, yes. Whether we be able to completely do it,
Right.
this time, probably not. But we should always do the best that we can.
There's so many things. Somebody said they didn't understand the question. We understood it because we know what he's talking about. In terms of you have so many things that have like names of gods, and it's in our language also. That's why this is a battle that I don't fight. Some other people fight it more than I do. I don't fight it because in language and in everything, in our everyday thing, when you go back to Greek mythology and Roman mythology, so many of the gods' names of that period are part of what became the language of today. For example, the Roman goddess of victory name is Victoria. Victory is part of Victoria, right? So when we say the word victory, we recognize victory as winning, right? And Victoria was preceded by Nike, the Greek goddess of victory, right? So this is what I'm talking. There's so many other words. There's so many other things that you could think of that, if you're driving a Crown Victoria, a car, Crown Victoria, technically that is the name of a goddess, of a Roman goddess. Are you going to get rid of your Crown Victoria? If you're driving any kind of Mazda, right? Mazda is, I believe it's an Indian god. It's an Indian god or goddess, whatever. Those are the technical aspects of what the rabbi is talking about and the question was coming from. Those type of things, right? So that's what the question was based on, whether or not we should try to eliminate everything. But it's so caught up even in language that you'll be using words, just the uses of the everyday vocabulary will have you mentioning a Greek god or a Roman god. You got it? Okay, great. She says she got it. Can you give a brief history on Mizrahi Jews? To my knowledge, they lived in North Africa.
They might live there now, but they originate from and this to be real brief, originate from still the Middle Eastern regions. A lot of these, with the exception of Ashkenazi, have their roots in the Middle East or the Levant area. So whether it's Sephardic or Mizrahi, they will come from those areas. And of course, you have Yemenite Jews, which of course come from Yemen. So these are just some of the sects that originate from that region.
Let's see here. Question. Am I correct for not wanting to eat at family or friend's house when they have a dog and have urns?
In terms of dogs, well, I would say both. It depends on I would say the setting of the dinner itself. Oh no, the question I don't think spoke about eating there, but just being invited, and just in
No.
terms of being in
Am
a
I
place
correct
that
for not
has
wanting to eat at family or friends' houses when they have a dog and have
but yes,
urns?
I did mention eating. So
Yes.
we have to be careful of where we eat anyway. When we have family or friends that don't keep the same way of life that we have, to the best of our ability, we should refrain from. I mean, we should refrain from eating there. but to the best of our ability, we should explain why we refrain from eating in those locations. So even before we get to things that they may have within their house, we have to deal with the way that they eat versus the way that we eat. And that's, going to be primary. But in terms of not eating and just going to somebody's house and they have things there, idols or whatever, you're not, as long as you're not going there with the intention of being involved with any type of worship or ceremony, anything that would involve that, there wouldn't be anything wrong with just visiting there. The same way, those of us that have one way of belief that is not Christian, some of us will go to a funeral in a church for a family member or friend, but not be involved with the prayers that go along with the service, but we're there in attendance in honor of the person that passed and also to support the family. So there are going to be scenarios where we would enter areas that have idols or things that we are not supposed to be worshiping, but it's all about the intent when we enter into there.
Hallelujah. The person said the house which I was invited, they have 2 urns and a dog. What's the rabbi's thoughts? He just gave you his thoughts. And that's it. That concludes the questions. Hour and 36 minutes so far. So thank you all for joining us. We pray and we ask that the Most High God, creator of heaven and earth, will continue to watch each and every one of us, protect us and keep us. As I say on a weekly basis, don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. Don't forget to share this video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to like the video so that it could get, higher search. It could be easier to search in the algorithm. It'll be one of the videos that's at the top. So as I say all the time, we do not charge you anything for this. We don't charge for anything that we do, really. For the exception of you come for feast days and stuff like that, we have a price for families and individuals, because everyone should show up with something to contribute. But for shows like this, people usually charge, and we don't. So we ask you for your donations. As you see here, Venmo, Zelle, PayPal. You could donate to us in any one of those platforms. Venmo, if you don't know how to use the QR code with your phone, Venmo, you could hit us at BEIT D.C.B, at BEIT D.C.B. PayPal and Zelle, you could get us at info at BEIT DCB.org. Once again, info at BEITDCB.org. That's info at BEITDCB.org. That's our actual email address. You could donate to us that way. You can also donate to us on the super chat right next to where the chat box is at, where you type in your chat. There should be a money symbol there. You press that, and it will show you the steps that you need to take to actually donate to us. So we thank you all for your continued support, and we pray that the creator of heaven and earth will continue to watch over you, guide, and protect you. As I say these words, I pray that the Most High God will bless and keep us. Hallelujah. Yevareka Yehovah Yishmareka. Ya'ir Yehovah Panawaleka Wikuneka. Yisa Yehovah Panawaleka Weyasemlaka. Shalom. May Yehovah bless thee and keep thee. May Yehovah make his face to shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee. May Yehovah lift up his countenance upon thee and may he grant thee peace. Amen. Shalom, shalom, family, and thank you for joining us once again. I pray that the Most High God, creator of heaven and earth, will continue to bless and keep each and every one of you. Shalom, shalom. Stay tuned for our commercial, a Unity Shabbat, and our outro. Shalom, family. Mark your calendars for an extraordinary day of unity and spiritual elevation. Congregation BEIT D.C.B invites you to the annual Unity Shabbat Kum on Saturday, May 24th, 2025. Where? at Shelf Lofts, Brooklyn, 120 Hamilton Avenue, Brooklyn, New York, 11231. This day is dedicated to praising and glorifying the Most High Yah, bringing together congregations, guests, and truth seekers in a celebration of unity, love, peace, and harmony. Join us for heartfelt prayers, inspiring teachings, and uplifting music that will resonate with your soul. Be part of this transformative experience that strengthens our community bonds and deepens our spiritual connections. For more information and to reserve your spot, call us at 347-622-9090 or email us at info@baydcb.org. Let's come together in faith and fellowship at the Unity Shabbat Kum. You won't want to miss it. Shalom.
Let's get knowledge, wisdom, understanding. We'll do our standing. All praises to the Most High, His laws and commandments. The hot CHOKMAH BINAH here to push it through your speakers. Judgment, truth, and love should be coming from the leaders. Yeah, knowledge, wisdom, understanding. We'll do our standing. All praises to the Most High, His laws and commandments. The hot CHOKMAH BINAH here to push it through your speakers. Judgment, truth, and love should be coming from the leaders. Yeah.